Hello creatives, I'm Joanna Penn from thecreativepenn.com, and today I'm talking about the different ways that authors make a living and the different business models that you can consider if you want to do this full time. Because actually the truth is that most authors do not make all their money from book sales, and this is really important to realise. In fact, the Society of Authors in the UK, as reported by The Guardian, talked about the average income for authors being £12,500 a year, which is around $15,000 US, which for most people is definitely not a living wage. Now, of course, the media will always report the Forbes richest authors, people like James Patterson, Stephen King, J.K. Rowling, Dan Brown, household names, but the majority of authors are not household names. So you have to look at the reality of how you actually pay the bills if you want to write full time. So here are some of the different ways you can make an income as a writer. So I should say up front that there is absolutely nothing wrong with having a day job. And in fact, if you love your day job and you're happy, then stick it out and have fun writing and just make that extra bit of money on the side, however you choose to publish. And that might actually be the most sustainable model. But if you do want to make a living with your writing, there are some options. So the most common option is actually teaching. So if you go to a university, the lecturers in creative writing, or in a school, most of those English teachers, most of those lecturers will have written books in some form and will make their main amount of money for their living from actually teaching, lecturing. This might be in person, so at courses, but it can also be online these days, which is really cool. So I do some teaching as part of my living. How to Write a Novel is an online course, and I have another one coming on how to write non-fiction, as well as stuff about making money and that type of thing. So teaching is a very common and really good form of income for writers. Then, of course, there are the different rights licensing options for authors. So, for example, you might have foreign rights income, you might have movie or TV options, which many of us would love, but many authors who've been around a long time, those who've been writing 10, 20, 30, 40 years, have money coming in from multiple income streams from these different forms of rights licensing. So even if an author is not in the bestseller lists and sort of, doing really well on the outside, they may actually be getting these recurring income streams from their intellectual property assets, which is very cool. And one of the reasons I love writing books, because those income streams can just continue for years. So that rights licensing model really is related to a backlist and how you can exploit those rights over time. But it's important to remember that author earnings are not just ebook sales on Amazon or print sales or audiobook sales or in a particular country, that actually most authors make money from all these different disparate streams from all over the world and all different types of rights. Then, of course, there is the services model. So many authors also work as editors, they might be professional speakers, which is very common in the non-fiction author space. They might be freelance designers, they might work as freelance writers for magazines, different anthologies, different books, that type of thing, online publications. They might be journalists. Other services are things like book formatting, book design, coaching, mentoring. These are the different kinds of services. And when I say services, it usually is a money for time approach. So you get paid for your time, which is different to the book model where you create it once and it's scalable in that you create it once and you keep earning money later. I'd also like to include things like advertising into the services type model. So, for example, some companies pay me to advertise on my podcast. So Kobo Writing Life, for example, Ingram Spark, that advertising, I'm performing a service, which is the podcast, and they are paying to be part of that. Also affiliate revenue, which is, for example, I did a video on how to format your book with Vellum, and I'm an affiliate of Vellum. So if you watch that video and you like it and you decide to use my link, I get a percentage of that sale. So this type of service model, affiliate, other revenue streams is very common and really helps, because the writing income definitely goes up and down depending on the season, depending on whether you're writing in a genre that's hot right now, depending on what what marketing you're doing. So having these other forms of income is super important. Another emerging model that's quite exciting is the Patron model. Now, of course, if you're writing and your income is being supplemented by a wonderfully supportive partner, or maybe the fact that you have already put money away and you've retired on something that you've put away, that kind of is you are your own patron, or your partner is your patron. But also now we have the wonderful site Patreon, patreon.com, and I have a Patreon at the Creative Penn, and people support my podcast. Now, there are also authors supporting writers. I support the wonderful award-winning writer N.K. Jemisin on Patreon, and I love to know that I'm supporting an author, and there are a number of authors now using that either for short stories or for other forms of writing where they're being supported by their own reader community. Then, of course, there are those authors who are making money purely from book sales alone, and they tend to split into two main camps. First of all, the mainly traditionally published model where an author might get a very high advance, which is incredibly rare, or they are an established author and they're making good money with their book sales. But as I mentioned up front, that model is quite rare. And then in the self-publishing community, there are the authors working on the high production model, which is putting out a book every 1 to 3 months, which for many of us sounds kind of crazy, but some authors are working super hard on doing this, and it can work. Most of those authors are writing in established genres with a lot of voracious readers, and many of them are also publishing within the Kindle Unlimited or KU ecosystem, which means they are exclusive to Amazon. Many of them are also then using print books and audiobooks to supplement or even to grow their income, and also the rights licensing model we talked about. So basically, there are multiple ways that you can have income as a writer. You can use your words in these different ways. I'm using my words now, whether you're writing them or speaking them, whether you have podcast, whether you have just books, whether you have a blog, all of these things come into making a living with your writing. And personally, I choose to use pretty much a bit of everything when it comes to making a living. And if you want to find out more, then I cover all of this in How to Make a Living with Your Writing, available in ebook and print and workbook and audio editions. So I hope you found that useful today, and I'll be back next week with another business of writing tip. So subscribe to the channel, and please leave your questions, comments, or suggestions for other videos below, as I would love to hear from you and what you would like to know about the business of writing. So happy writing, and I'll see you next time.